Welcome to the Centurion's Path, a podcast about the life and the trials and tribulations of those who serve. This podcast is about the heroes who protect our communities. To truly understand the path of the protector, tune in with AJ D'Andrea and John McDonald, two nationally known leaders who live the Centurion's Path every day.
Thank you all for joining us today. To our sponsor for today's podcast, Safe Haven Defense, preserving property, protecting lives, providing peace of mind. Well, welcome everybody to the Centurion's Path, episode 3. It's pretty exciting. We made it to 3 episodes.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? You know, it's pretty exciting. We've actually had a bigger audience than I think either of us had anticipated, and that's pretty cool. We appreciate everybody tuning in, listening, and the feedback has been wonderful. So, typically we're going to have a lot of guests, but today we've got stuff we need to talk about, and it's an opportunity for, I think, you and I just to kind of talk about some stuff that's been going on with us and have a conversation, because sometimes crisis hits close to home. And we both did a national network interview last week that we need to talk about. That'll be coming out in a documentary in the next couple of weeks. And I think so there's just a lot of stuff to maybe touch base on. And then we'll get back to guests coming up soon. We've got some really cool people lined up. So I enjoyed our conversation with Brian Murphy last time. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I got a lot of personal messages, people saying thank you. It was a really great conversation, and he's a dynamic speaker. He's straightforward. Yeah. He is who he is. Yeah. And that you got to appreciate that.
Absolutely. I really love the resiliency. So that was pretty cool.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, I think before we get into the interview, which I think took a lot of our time away from our life. No, and I'm just joking about that. But they were both very long. I get that. I was curious just to get your thoughts and kind of walk me through what was going on with you, because I'm sure a lot of people don't know, and I know a lot of our listeners aren't going to know this, but your sister was in Israel when the attacks happened, and you had to move mountains truly with your bare hands, with not a lot of assistance, to get her out of there and get her home safely. And I just thought that would be a great way to kind of start today's conversation. Just, one, let you get some stuff off your chest. But
yeah, well, there's certainly some frustration, and just grateful that she's back. And I'm going to say some stuff today that's probably not going to be real popular, but it's, we speak truth here, and we're not afraid. Learned a couple things. Saturday, the attack happens over a week ago now, and pretty quickly we started getting text messages from her. Thankfully, the texting was still up and running. They had shut the internet down. She was in Bethlehem at the time when this happened, and geographically it's about 25 miles from Jerusalem, which is where our nearest embassy is. And they were really unsure of what they should do, where they should go, what this meant for them. There was a real lack of information. I'm a news hound. I'm following news pretty constantly in my life. So yes, I'm feeding her information on what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing on TV. And I told her, I said, look, you all are going to need to contact the embassy. Make sure that they know where you're at. Maybe you need to get to the embassy in Jerusalem. Maybe, you got to get a flight out right now. You can't wait. And that was my thought at the time. And so a lot of just information in a vacuum. There were just little coming out at that point. And throughout the day, you could see it progressively getting worse. And I talked to my wife, and she's a former Colorado Attorney General. And I said, do you have any contacts that we can reach out to that can help us? And she started working her network, and she told me, she said, you need to reach out to Mark Geist. Mark's a friend, and he was one of the heroes of Benghazi. If you know the story of the secret soldiers of Benghazi, the 13 hours that those guys were left on their own. So I've known Mark for several years through Cynthia. And I reached out to Mark, and he started working his contacts. And he reached out to a pretty well-known general who's now retired. And he was told that conditions on the ground were going to deteriorate within the next 24 to 36 hours and to get out now. Don't wait. So I provided that information. Now, at the same time, the priests leading the trip are in contact with the governor of North Dakota, where she's from, and I had urged everybody to start calling the U.S. senators because they could put pressure on the State Department. Family members are making those calls to the U.S. senators, and we're having a lot of conversation via text about how do we get you and your tour safe. And there was a lot of indecision happening. They reached out to the embassy in Jerusalem, and they were told, it's not an emergency, we can't help you. Really?
Yeah, right.
Isn't that, I'm like, that, go figure. There's our government.
Yeah.
Now, other countries they're doing a lift. They're getting their people out of that region pretty quickly, but not ours. In fact, I don't think it was until, this last Friday when the U.S. government started finally doing some sort of airlift. I don't even know if it started then. That's just what I heard on the news. But we're talking, 5-6 days late. You and I live in a world of crisis management where time matters. Seconds count. What are the decisions that you're making moment in time? So as this continued to deteriorate, I'm getting text messages from her about 1 a.m. telling me that the tour guide and the tour company is going to take them from Bethlehem to Jerusalem to do some shopping and to visit some sites there. This is 2 days after the war started.
You're kidding me.
No. And I said, I turned the TV on and I'm watching it, and it says rocket attack on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. So I told her, don't go to Jerusalem. She's like, we're already here. Because by the time I got the text and woke up, and they were already there. So I was telling her, look, there's attacks going on right now in Jerusalem. It's not a safe place to be. So the tour guide company packs them up in the buses very quickly after Stacy had said something. I think others had said something about we don't feel comfortable or safe. All of a sudden, they packed them up, quickly moved them out, brought them back into Palestine to Bethlehem, which now you're going from Israel, which is at least a friendly country, to Palestine, where, is this a safe zone? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I've never been there, don't know anything about it, but I'm not feeling real good about their decision making.
Yeah, right. So
throughout the day, I'm talking to her, texting with her. I got on a call. Remarkably, we were able to get through without much problem. So had a conversation with her and the tour guide company and two priests and a deacon of her church, who's a retired Air Force guy. And I'm giving them the intel that Mark Geist had given me because they don't know. They're not hearing anything. And we told them, look, you got to get out. You cannot wait. Well, there was some discussion and dissension within the group, not within the group I was talking about, but within the broader group about, we should wait because they were told at that point by their U.S. senators just to hold and trust in your government to get you out.
What do we always say?
Right.
Take care of yourself, right?
Take care of yourself.
Government.
What did Ronald Reagan say? The scariest words in the English language is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. So because of that guidance, they decided to hold in place. And they decided, and the tour company was ready to bring them out Monday, but they waited until Tuesday. And then by Tuesday, they knew their flights were canceled. And we all knew that flights are going to be canceled. There was no way they're going to be taken off out of Tel Aviv at that point with rockets coming in. So Tuesday, their flights officially get canceled. They have to make the decision on what to do. And they decide, this is now the time they're going to make a run for the border in Jordan. Of course, nobody called the embassy in Jordan. Nobody called the Jordanians to say, hey, we're coming.
Right.
So they got there, and it's, like a dozen buses filled with Americans trying to get across the border. And some of the Americans were jumping out of the buses, running across the border into Jordan. And I thought, wow, the symbolism with that, what's going on our southern border,
right.
Interesting. Of course, they had to get processed and go through multiple checkpoints. Maybe we should do that too.
You think?
Right? So you can tell them irritable about this whole thing, but a lot of people taking credit. A lot of people taking credit for, stuff that they didn't do. I didn't do a whole lot other than provide them intel, which you always tell everybody when you train, everybody in the course, that we live our life by three things. We live our life by PI. Right. And that's a whole conversation we're going to have someday. But PI is priority of life, intel, and environment. And the intel that we get often dictates our decision making, because it's the most critical factor in understanding what we're working with. And if you don't have intel, you're just operating without full faculties, and you don't know if your decisions are going to be good or bad, and it's tough to make a good decision after you make a bad one with poor intel in a war, in a country that's now hit by war. So that was challenging. I struggled because they get to Jordan, they get across the border, they get into a hotel. Now, Cynthia, my wife, had, through her amazing network of attorney generals, had made a contact in Jordan who contacted the Jordanian government, and they sent a representative out to check on them. I don't think anybody from the U.S. Embassy ever went out to check on that group, or I don't know if they went to check on others, but so it would have been nice if our people would have greeted them, would have been on the border to meet them, frankly, as you knew how many Americans were coming over at that point. You had to.
Right.
And I would imagine there's information sharing going on between the Jordan government and our embassy, but it didn't sound like anybody was there to meet them. They waited for hours to get processed. And then when they finally evacuated, half their group had to stay behind for an extra.
What was that about?
Well, I'm not sure if it was airlift capacity, but half of them made it out, half of them didn't. What was interesting is that the leaders of the group all left with the first group out and left their people behind. We grew up in a different type of mentality and philosophy. We're the last man out. And we take care of our people. And so I struggle with that, frankly, because you should never leave anybody behind if you're the leader of that group. So she got out, she got home, she's doing well. Grateful for the Attorney General's network, CWAG, fantastic support system. Mark Geist, and sort of the guy knows everybody in the government and intel business, and the Shadow Warriors organization, who's done a lot of work on getting Americans out of Afghanistan. Mark contacted me and said, "Look, I'm willing to get on a plane and go to Jordan. I'll meet them, and the Shadow Warriors organization is supporting this, and they'll help you get them out," which was huge. I mean, that was absolutely huge. And it ended up that we didn't need the Shadow Warriors organization to help get them out. But the fact that they were willing to do that they were ready to go to support us, meant a lot. And
that's a huge deal.
It is deeply appreciated. So that was the last week. I went 48 hours with no sleep. I'm getting too old for that. But, at one point,
I'm still older than you, so don't forget that.
At one point, while she's in Bethlehem, and they can hear gunshots and they can hear distant bombs going off, I had a conversation with her about what do you do if they come to your door? Because we needed to have that conversation. Yeah. And that conversation was tough. It was, sleep with your tennis shoes on, barricade your door, you evade, if you can, but you don't get taken. Don't ever get taken, because that's not going to end well, not in that environment. And it was tough. It was a hard night for her. She and her roommate on the trip ended up pulling the mattress off the bed, sleeping on the floor. Talked about, look, stay low to the ground. If you have a phone, charge it. If you have a flashlight, have it ready. I mean, just the stuff that, what are your evacuation routes? Have you thought about that? Those are conversations we all need to have with ourselves whenever we travel. I do that when I travel domestically. I'm sure you do it when you travel internationally. And so that was probably the night I was most worried, was Monday night into Tuesday morning, when they could start hearing distant gunfire and explosions. And I thought, okay, this thing comes to their door. What are the options? What are the opportunities? Pretty minimal. And that was really concerning. So, yeah. Anyway, she's safe, and once again, our government does not have the ability to pivot very well.
Right.
And I don't know how you fix that. I think that becomes part of climate and culture, just like any organization.
Right.
And, we talk a lot about the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And I think we could all learn something from that at all levels of government to make a whole lot better preparedness and response, and not just lean on our military to live that OODA loop.
Right.
So.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because that's what I'm doing later this afternoon and all day tomorrow is up at a local government agency just north of me, doing evacuate, evade, defend, and trying to instill that mindset. But I think the thing that bothers me the most of this entire thing, and I'm grateful your sister got home and the network and all of that, but this is reminiscent of 9/11 and the absolute lack of intel. Mm-hmm. And that's concerning to me.
Yep.
Especially when
I think it should be.
We understand the capabilities, and to be caught totally flat-footed, and our government to be totally flat-footed and not have an idea that this was going to take place and provide, warnings. I mean, you get on the Department of State website, there are warnings where you can go and where you can't. I'm leaving for Serbia on Saturday. I'll be there with the Department of State, and of course I've gone and looked, even though they're saying,
right.
That I think that's the most concerning thing is and it's going to go into, I think, the interview that we're going to talk about that we both went through about Uvalde. Is there's lessons learned that somehow we start to forget, or we get, I don't know what the right word, I don't want to say complacent, because I think the guys, the men and women out there that are working in the intel gathering area, I think they have good hearts. I think they're trying to work hard. But are we adapting? Are we nimble enough, right, to adapt to that?
I think we're too big to be nimble. I think we've gotten so big it's impossible to be, because it's that old phrase, analysis or paralysis by analysis. I think we're analyzing it to death, and then by the time you make a decision, everything's changed. Right. So I just think that term is pretty fitting for what we're seeing. And I don't have a clear view into the role of our intel people. I don't live in that world, but we all see what's happening. I mean, we can all see it with our own eyes. We can see policy decisions. We can hear the politicians talk, see the analysts discuss. And it's still just a snapshot into what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
But when you see repeated issues, and it's just like rinse, repeat constantly. It seems like we've been on this merry-go-round before.
Right.
So fix it.
Exactly.
It's just, right? That's really where I'm at with this thing.
We can't falter.
No. And
when we do, this is what happens.
And I worry. I am deeply worried about what's coming here in this country. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't buy into that, but I can see with my own eyes what our environment is like right now around the country. The hostility, the anger, the frustration, the angst, rising crime, people coming into this country that we don't know, we're not vetting. It all worries me, because at the end of the day, just from a threat analysis based on the work that we do surrounding an active shooter, we know what's coming.
Right.
And that worries me.
Well, it worries me deeply as well. We after 9/11, did incredible things.
Yeah.
Just try to figure out who's in the country, who's coming, who's going. But yet we fail. We fail at the southern border, and when we fail at the southern border, we are failing the citizens of the United States of America. Oh. And it is, I know, again, the men and women down there doing the job.
Yeah.
Doing the best that they can.
Absolutely.
But, you bring up some valid points. Who's gotten over that we don't know about? And if you wanted to hurt us, that's the route in.
That's the route in.
I can't get on the airplane. I can't do this, I can't come in through a port. That's the way in. And we've advertised it.
Yeah.
And at some point, I hope people wake up and demand something different.
And now we're hearing that reports of the northern border having some pretty serious problems too. And who's getting in through our northern neighbors and then coming into our country? I don't know. I mean, At the end of the day, it shouldn't be this hard to fix this problem. And, it just takes commitment. It takes effort. And, but so much of this does. And that's the world we're living in. So I don't know. It's frustrating for sure.
Yeah. Well, while you were dealing with that, just a quick tidbit, which I thought was a really, really cool experience, is, I was up in Vancouver, and I had the opportunity to meet with a boys club network.
Okay.
Where they find young men that, are on the fringe, they're on that precipice of maybe going into gang life, maybe not, and it provides mentorship. And I got to spend about an hour and a half with them just talking about, life and overcoming obstacles and staying focused and the ramifications of the decisions we make. And man, what a powerful group, powerful experience, motivating
very
for
cool.
me, right, to be able to see these young men. They were young too. I mean, I forgot to ask the organizer what the youngest is, but I would say maybe 13 to
Wow.
probably 18, 19. But the intellect, the questions that were asked, well thought out, and they're doing a really cool thing up there.
That's very cool. I like hearing that.
Yeah, it was a neat experience. So,
Good for you.
yeah.
One of the great things that we get to do is, see things that most people don't, and have opportunities to do stuff like that and connect with
Right.
young people like that. I saw something pretty remarkable. I was just down in Houston last couple of days and had a chance to work with your daughter, and that was really cool. She was fantastic. We were doing some work down there for an international school, and it was remarkable. What a difference in what we saw in terms of the way they treat school safety, the way they treat the students, how students treat each other. I was so impressed. It's just unlike anything I'm used to. And Madeline and I kept looking at each other saying, wow, I mean, this is crazy. This is really important stuff happening here.
Climate and culture.
Yeah, climate
And culture.
And you know what?
We teach what we accept.
Yeah.
We teach what we accept, right? I always get that reversed, but honestly, what we accept is what we teach is the appropriate behavior, and we've lost control in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Of climate and culture.
We're not modeling very well.
No.
Adults aren't modeling good behavior for kids, so we wonder why.
Right.
Some of the stuff's happening. Well, look in the mirror, and it points right back to our generation, evidently, because these are our kids.
Yeah, right.
So fix it.
We don't got to look very far.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Let's take a break for a minute.
Yeah.
Safe Haven Defense, preserving property, protecting lives, providing peace of mind.
So a couple weeks ago, I got a phone call. And I promptly threw you under the bus with me.
Yeah, I hate you, but that's okay. Yeah.
So the phone call came from Frontline, PBS News, and they are doing a documentary on Uvalde, and they wanted help with analysis on what happened, what went wrong, the why. And I had to talk to them a lot before I felt comfortable doing the interview, because you and I have both done interviews where it's like they want you to play Monday morning quarterback and
Right.
they want you to do, talk about the bad things that happened and how you would have done it better. And, I learned from you because of your experience at Columbine. We stay out of that lane. We don't get involved in that. And then as the conversation continued, I realized what they were doing in cooperation with a couple of big Texas newspapers is really, we're trying to understand where we've come for the last 25 years in this world of active shooters, school shootings, tactics, incident command, school safety. What have we learned and what's not working?
Right.
And their approach, I have to be honest, I went from skeptical to thinking, okay, I get it. I understand it, what you want to do. And I'm willing to have conversation about the stuff that I am comfortable with and my own knowledge base. I told him I'm not a tactical expert. I don't claim to be. I've been through a lot of active shooter trainings, but I would not consider myself to be an expert. What I do feel like I'm an expert in is school safety. Excuse me. I feel like I'm an expert in school safety, or at least a student of it, and incident command operations. I've been in enough of them to know what it should and shouldn't look like.
Right.
And I can explain what we see and what we're not seeing. So from that lens, I thought, I'll sit down and talk. So they brought a crew up from New York and Texas and came here to Missouri and sat down. It turned out to be a 6-hour interview. I've never done an interview longer than maybe an hour.
Right.
6 hours of watching video, 6 hours of watching body cam video, 6 hours of watching school surveillance video, listening to radio traffic. And as I was watching this, I was getting more and more frustrated. And as they were asking questions, I was trying to explain, opportunities that were missed, or opportunities that just weren't taken advantage of, or the key decisions moment in time. And I started thinking to myself, and I told them, if you really want to understand Uvalde, you have to talk to the people who are experts in both tactics and psychology of this issue. So I told them, if you want the definitive story, they got to talk to you. They need to talk to Dr. Nicoletti. And I think I hammered that probably 10, 15 times, because as I watched this more and more, what I was realizing is that a lot of this was obviously law enforcement operational issues. And that's your realm. But then as I watched the first decisions, as I read the Texas after action report that came out of the legislature, as I listened to that radio traffic and some of the issues, I was realizing all the school failures that occurred that day as well. And the school failures help compound the operational law enforcement failures. One of the things that we learned really quick in designing our programs is that whatever we design has to support you on the law enforcement side. Because if I'm designing something that doesn't support you, then your response is not as effective as it could be, because I'm not putting you in a position to succeed. I'm not putting our kids and staff in a position to succeed. And that was the frustration for me and the heartbreak. And at one point, it's pretty emotional, because there's a little 10-year-old girl making a phone call, asking for help. Mm-hmm. Teachers are dying next to her. Her friends are dying or dead. And she wants them to come help. And they don't come in for a long time.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking. And if we truly believe that the most honorable thing that we can do is protect our most vulnerable, and we believe that, then that also requires that the oath we take, whether it's oath to protect as a police officer, that oath we take in the military, that oath we'd maybe just take to ourselves, that I'm going to be the protector moment in time, it has to mean something. But that requires that the leaders step up and lead.
Right.
That requires that's where I struggle with this whole thing.
Yeah, me too. It was, like I said, I hate you. Because I started talking to them. I don't know what day you did your interview, but I think I got a text on Saturday. I was talking to them, told them my schedule. 'Cause I'm pretty busy till the end of the year. There's not a lot of empty space. And on Sunday night, they told me they're on a plane to Denver, wanting to interview me Monday night. Now, I don't think my interview was 6 hours, but it might have been 5. It was probably more like 4, in all honesty. And yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult in a lot of different ways. And again, I said this over and over and over again, and I hope they say this in their documentary, that the men and women that made entry into that building are brave, courageous individuals, period. Going to a place inside a structure where you know that there's someone with a gun, it's easy to, minimize that unless you've done it. They were brave individuals. They lacked leadership. 110%. And not just leadership in the moment, which was critical, but the forward thinking of, hey, this might happen someday. Someday we might get an individual into a room that barricades, that still wants to harm kids. We can't go through the main door because he's shooting through it. And debunk the whole thing. There's nothing that upsets me more when people say, well, that's what law enforcement signed up for. Well, no, I didn't sign up to get shot at. I didn't sign up to get shot, right? But the lack of foresight, and I've tried to push this in as many different avenues as I can, and you'd be amazed of some of the resistance that you get. But of what are the options, right? We need to understand that we have to have options to deal with that particular dilemma. And so it was really hard for me. And again, I had to sit through, and they would show me the body cam video and the school surveillance and listen to the radio traffic. And I tried not to be critical in the moment, although their questions were asking for that, right? They wanted a critique. I hope it doesn't come across that way, but because you're not there. It is hard to critique when you're not there, and it's easier to critique the lack of pre-planning for this and preparedness, and the vision of what we need to do. It's easy to critique the fact that there was no incident command, right? Yeah. The scene control. I mean, there was 100 guys in that building, and we always talk about, if you don't have a job to do in the building, you don't need to be in the building. If you don't have a job, you're outside, right? And you brought up opportunity, and we train, and we change away from the time is on our side mantra and all that, nonsense years ago we train to create and seize opportunity. If we're doing things positive, that's good time. If we're doing things complacently or we're not doing anything at all, that's bad time. And they had a ton of bad time where there was nothing being done. Now, I'm not saying that, at a certain point, just because of some of the communications, when it's coming over the air that he's contained, we have him contained, that creates a different thought process, right? And I'm not going to critique where they fall into a barricade situation versus an active shooter, but I will talk about intel, right? You talked about PI, life safety priorities, intel tactics are intel driven, and the environment dictates our tactics. We had some critical things, and intel is the thing that drives us. If we truly believe, moment in time, that it's a barricade, then we treat it as a barricade. But if intel changes, then our tactics, or what our focus of energy is, needs to change as well. And that, I think, was probably some of the hardest part for me, is when some of that additional intel started coming in, and there was lack of understanding that intel and doing something about it. And again, it all comes down to, and there's a facade out there, right? There's a facade out there that, because you've got the stars or you got the bars, that you know what you're doing. And, not everybody does.
Right.
You grow up, what's your forte? What do you go through? And certain leaders do certain things better than others. But the lack of understanding and of guidance from the leadership level was really, really hard.
How do you fix that? I mean,
How do you fix it?
yeah.
Well, our community, and I'm talking the school leadership as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm not just talking law enforcement, but the school leadership as well, knowing that this door doesn't lock and that we've got this issue and we've got that, and we're not following protocols that we, if we even had protocols.
Right.
You've got to look inward and say, okay, if I'm going to do this, we have to be at our best every day.
Yeah.
What is that saying? I hear a lot of that average is the enemy of excellence. Is that, do you hear that?
I'm not, but I like it.
Well, good is the good.
Good. Yeah.
Even being above average is
Right.
the enemy, right? Settling. We have to be excellent. We have to be excellent. And we have to understand our role. And like you said, you took an oath.
Yeah.
And we get bogged down in so many other things, trivial stuff that, blows me away. Sit in an executive meeting or a command staff meeting and the things that we waste our time on that we're talking about, at times can be extremely frustrating. Some of that stuff needs to be vetted. I'm not minimizing all of it, right? But this better be a lesson. I mean, we had a watershed moment at Columbine to say, hey, listen, we had the wrong tactic in place. All right, we had the perimeter tactic, right? And then we had this watershed moment of a couple other events. We had this watershed moment at the Aurora Theater shootings with Rescue Task Force to say, hey, firefighters got to be involved. I truly believe that there's two watershed moments that we better be paying attention to with this thing at Uvalde. And one, that is leadership. On the ground leadership, coupled with actual incident command. Right, I can't tell you how many command posts I've walked into in their incident commands, and the so-called incident commander is just, deferring everything. And then again, the forward thinking. The forward thinking. We just saw an attack in Israel. We suffer an attack like that in the United States, it's going to cripple us. And the entities that are going to stop that are our men and women in law enforcement.
Yeah.
We've been thinking it through. I certainly know some tactical minds have. But at what point does it get buffered? What point does it get stopped as it kind of goes up the chain as they try to prepare? Because that's the crux. That is the crux of our job in law enforcement. Yeah. You wear body armor and carry a gun for one reason and one reason only. That's protect lives, right? Everything else they do is fluff. When we fail at that, though, there's some hard questions. And again, there needs to be some hard questions. And I hope that we, you dig deep and say, okay, here we are, Leadership there, lack of incident command and oversight, and then a lack of just forward thinking. And sometimes I think the public's okay with it, which just breaks my heart. Sometimes I think our cops are okay with it. The only option I have as an active shooter is run with my ass on fire and jump through that door and see what's going to happen. And that's insanity. Yeah. There's other options out there that we can address these things as effectively, if not more effective, than jumping in a room and seeing who the better gunfighter is. We may talk about those later. I know you wanted to have Murphy back on and have a conversation about tactics, or maybe we do that when we get retired Captain Mike Odell on, which I'm
looking forward to that conversation.
Right. And maybe not. I don't know. I don't like to talk. I don't like to share a lot of tactics publicly. I think you know that.
I think it's more.
But I think you can talk about perceptually. I mean, right?
Yeah. 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 I don't think it's about sharing the tactics so much as having the conversation about the thought process of how you design and build and create and then make that a foundational aspect of your agency.
Right. And it's an interesting thing because it gets, I've worked around some really solid guys that maybe still don't get it. That we've got this priority here, right? But intel is what's driving. And we need to be acting off of that intel because that is truly what we know moment in time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll still get kickback on some decisions on maybe what we should probably be focusing on based off intel versus, let's just, do this one thing. And again, maybe not be nimble, maybe not be flexible.
Yeah.
And being nimble and being flexible are huge.
I like it when people say we're going to monitor the situation.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. When you're going to monitor it, your response time is already going to fail.
Yeah, you're done.
How about responding to the situation?
How about directing the situation?
Directing it. Yes.
Yeah.
Leading.
Yeah.
Leading from the front, not the rear.
We understand how the brain works, right? When we start to direct, when we are the ones that are dictating the terms, manipulating the environment, having options available to us, taking away options from our adversary, that is when we start to win, even just by reaction time, let alone by a multitude of other things.
This is tough. I mean, I got a little emotional watching that video because obviously we knew the outcome as we watched it, and we all want to be that person that does it right, that makes every great decision. But at the end of the day, as you watch it, what I took away from it was that issue of leadership. And I worry that it's something we're losing in this country is leadership. And I don't mean that at just the top level. I just mean we're just not building leaders. We're not spending enough time raising leaders and giving them the skill set and the tools necessary so that as they go through their careers, they go through their life, they have those opportunities to be better decision makers and help lift them up and guide them. And that's why I've always been a big proponent of mentoring, because I had such great mentors, and I really honor those people that helped me when I tripped over the tripwire and caused
chaos.
Just chaos. Yeah, that's a great term for it. But also, be willing to say, let's learn from the lesson and don't make that same mistake again. And I worry because we've got 25 years now from Columbine to Uvalde and beyond. And we've had a lot of good things happen in terms of school safety, in terms of active shooter. But we're also still seeing 25 years of failure. We got to fix that. I mean, that's the most frustrating part of all this, is that you go through your entire career trying to fix and help others learn, but sometimes it just doesn't sink in until it's your day and you're in it and you're experiencing it.
Well, I think, just to go back to your comments about leadership, and again, it becomes, and again, understand, at least for the listeners, these things aren't scripted. We kind of say, hey, I kind of want to talk about this, kind of want to talk about that. We don't really know what's going on. But it comes back to climate and culture.
Huh?
You want to talk about developing leaders? Then let's develop leaders. Let's get away from the nonsense we spend our time in. If you want to be that leader and all you're concerned about is the locker room gossip, and that's what you're perpetuating, right? Versus, okay, let's get rid of that stuff and let's actually talk about why are we here, what are we doing, and start to develop those individuals and make that become the focus point. Let that be the focus of what we're trying to do, right? Rather than the things that get allowed. And each agency is unique. Each agency is different. Some develop leaders much better than others. And that's, problematic, again, of the culture. And across the board, I agree with you. As much as people like to say bad things about, this younger generation, there's a lot of good qualities as well, right? How do we nurture that? How do we focus on that? But it definitely is lacking. It's lacking. It's easy to talk about in the classroom.
It is easy to talk about in the classroom. It's real world, real life that makes it obviously more complicated. But if you at least have some reference from the classroom, you hope that when you get into real life that you can translate some of that. Now, I'm reminded, though, my daughter, who's an attorney, and when she became an attorney, within the first month, she told me, Dad, everything I learned in law school has nothing to do with being an attorney. She said, they didn't teach me how to act in court. They didn't teach me, anything about being in court. And, you're learning that all on your own. And she was so frustrated by that. All this time, all this energy. Wouldn't have hurt them to, let's talk about what court's going to be like.
Right.
So
I think you could say that about a lot of law enforcement academies, as well, right? They check the boxes.
Yeah.
But they don't teach critical thinking. They don't teach decision making. They try to get into multitasking. But some of that is just on the job training. And the best way to prepare for that is having a mentor to kind of guide you and keep you focused, because there's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of pitfalls we can fall into.
One of the things that I've been surprised at recently, and I guess it's just because of the environment that we have worked in for so many years together, which is pretty heightened in terms of active shooter, just based on the community that we lived in and what we've been through. But I'm finding more and more cops and school districts that are telling me, oh, yeah, it's been 3 to 5 years since we've done really serious active shooter training. Now, I mandated active shooter training for my team twice a year.
Yeah,
and you were,
if not 3. Yeah,
right. And you were our lead instructor on this. Yeah. And I did that because I was always so terrified that these are perishable skill sets, and if we don't keep them up, and if we're not constantly thinking about and training for those possibilities, then we're not helping anybody. And when you're around kids and you may have to make a decision that impacts their lives, or your decisions can either cause loss of life or add value. You want to be in that camp where you're adding value. And I struggle when I hear, what do you mean 3 years? What do you mean 5 years?
Well, it goes back to, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it goes back to complacency, what we talked about earlier. 9/11 happened. Yeah. We try to get better, but then we get short on our laurels, right? What's come over the southern border? Are we prepared? What are we doing? People think that, it can't happen here, and then it does, and then they feel like, well, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And there's a lot of focus put on it. But then, both the professions, both, education, school safety, law enforcement get pulled in a million different directions, which is understandable, but we lose sight. We have some leaders that are adverse to it, right? Because they're not good at it. They don't feel comfortable about it. And so
I think that's very true.
It's not a place where they want to, instead of saying, hey, I'm not good at this, help me get better.
Yeah.
Right. There are some that actually shy away and don't try to excel in it. And again, we have to be excellent.
Goes back to checking your ego at the door.
Yeah, well.
Right? If you're not great at something, get better at it. And bring those people in that are great at it that can teach you.
Right. Well, I think it's probably time to start wrapping this one up. I am excited because when I get back from Serbia, I think I'm in Colorado for just a day or two, and then I'm out to see you. I'll be in Missouri.
We're gonna do a live podcast from Missouri School Board Association conference.
Yes,
and we've got Brian Krause who will be there. Brian was the principal at Platte Canyon during that terrible tragedy, and he's doing remarkable things today. And so we're going to get a chance to talk to him. We're going to get a chance to talk to Nate McVicker, who was Safe Haven Defense, and they're going to do a live demo with that new amazing window film glass, and then we're going to talk to some leaders and the school board world that are
who we can grab and pull into our web.
That's right, and really have a conversation with some different people about what it means to be a protector.
Right.
We have the Great Shakeout in Missouri, which is like an earthquake drill that goes on evidently once a year here. I didn't even know Missouri had earthquakes. Turns out there's a great big fault in this state.
Oh, really?
And, back in long time ago, at one point, I think the Mississippi River flowed backwards at some point through a huge earthquake. I need to learn my history, but it's earthquake state, so they practice the Great Shakeout. So that's what you heard there.
So just put that in perspective, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
However long ago there was that earthquake, and still Missouri on a yearly basis is doing earthquake drills.
Yeah.
Active shooters happen at such a high level, and we still have districts and law enforcement agencies that are not preparing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And you know what? That threat's happening a whole lot more than the earthquakes are.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of fun catching up and talking with you. I'm glad that you're going to have a chance to go to Serbia and teach them. They had a really tragic school shooting there about a year ago.
Yes. Yeah, it was their very first one, and then they had a copycat like the very next day.
Oh, yeah, they'll learn a lot from you.
I hope so.
And I'm glad, and make sure you got your bailout bag if you need to self-evacuate that country.
Absolutely, I'll call you for my checklist. Hey,
if you need an evac, I'll come get you.
There we go. Right. But I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Missouri, and listen, you be safe and have
you too.
All right.
Travel safe. I'll be in Arizona next week working, so we'll catch up soon.
Sounds good.
All right. As we end each podcast with our common toast at this point, to us, the Centurions, and those like us, damn few left. Damn few left. We're out. Thank you to Safe Haven Defense for sponsoring today's podcast and for walking the Centurion's path with us. Safe Haven Defense, preserving property, protecting lives, providing peace of mind.